Amy, we will. So now we are public facing at the
Wonderful.
moment. So,
Wonderful.
yes.
Glad to be here.
All right. And all right, people are starting to filter in. So if you are joining us, just joining us and coming into the Zoom, we have just a couple of minutes here and we will start the Thursday webinar. So just a minute or two to 4 o'clock. So, oh, so you're not that far away from us. Are you getting
Nope.
some of this rain and clouds and stuff up there in Denver too?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I was sharing with Benjamin earlier that it's been, 90s one week and 70s, and then we're going back up to the 90s again. So 'tis the season, I guess. Fake fall.
It's I do believe it's unseasonable. I think that this summer has been, 10 to
Yeah.
15 degrees above normal down here, and it has not we have not enjoyed that all that much. So
Yeah. I've been down that way a few times this year. So next time I come down, I'll come by and say hello.
Oh, please do. Yeah, let us know for
I'd
sure.
be glad to. Absolutely.
All right, so it looks like we have just turned to 4 o'clock and our folks are here and we are live on Facebook. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our Thursday webinar. I'm Liz Perry. If you are new to our series, we are Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. We're a nonprofit research and education center here in Southwest Colorado. You can check out our website at crowcanyon.org for more information. We are Zooming today. We are also back, thank you, Ben, streaming live on Facebook. So if Zoom gives you headaches, you can head over there. If you have any questions during the presentation today, go ahead and put them in the Q&A as soon as they occur to you. We do check the chat, but sometimes things can get lost, so it's easier to track in the Q&A button. We will be up this webinar and our prior webinars are up on our YouTube channel. If you are not a subscriber, we encourage it. Really, it's just turned into such an incredible resource of past presentations. I'd like to start like we usually do with some acknowledgements. We acknowledge the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. With the work that we're doing at Crow Canyon, we seek to bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold as a result of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We seek paths that support and align with Indigenous people and communities, and with gratitude, we honor the contributions of present-day Indigenous communities, descendants, the colleagues with whom we partner, and who help guide our work and our mission every day. Another gratitude moment for all of you who make this webinar series possible, entirely free webinar series, and so many of you donate all the time. We're so grateful. And as always, I love having a moment each week to think about our friend and colleague, Taylor Hasbrook, who created this webinar series at the start of the pandemic to really bring people together, to keep ideas flowing. We miss you, Taylor, and we're so grateful to you for creating this program. A couple of great talks coming up in the next couple of weeks. On September 11th, really unique presentation, Taking Our Water for the City, the Archaeology of New York City's Watershed Communities. So please join us for that one. And the week after that, we have geographical and political implications of Indigenous visualities in national parks. So another really amazing cutting edge topic. So please do join us next week, the next 2 weeks as well. Without further ado, I am so excited to introduce our speaker today, another incredibly cutting edge relevant topic. Amy Gillaspie is an anthropological archaeologist, a NAGPRA practitioner, college instructor, and museum professional with archaeological field experience in Peru, Belize, France, Colorado, and North Dakota. That is quite a fascinating geography. Amy began working in NAGPRA during her tenure at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where she assisted with consultations as a collections assistant, an archaeological research assistant, and a project archaeologist. She started her new role at the BIA NAGPRA Assistance Program Coordinator in September 2024. in an agreement between the Bureau of Indian Affairs and her current employer, Archaeology Southwest. As the BIA NAGPRA Assistance Program Coordinator, she supports the BIA in working with tribes on all steps of the NAGPRA process, including consultation, repatriation, returns and reburials of the ancestors, belongings, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony. Incredible job, incredible work you're doing, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. That was a wonderful and kind introduction, and I'm so happy to be here today. Let me go ahead and get my presentation set up here. All right.
Looks perfect.
Great. Thank you. Well, again, thank you to Liz and Benjamin. I appreciate everything, and to Taylor, very missed in our community. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this webinar series. I was sharing with Liz and Benjamin just now that I have been watching since the early days during the pandemic. So I am humbled and honored and grateful to be here today among amazing colleagues and peers in this webinar series. And today I'm going to share about our work at Archaeology Southwest and our agreement with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in NAGPRA assistance. So to get us started, our agenda, I'll be introducing myself, although Liz just did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for that. I'll be introducing Archaeology Southwest for those of you that are not familiar with the nonprofit and our relationship with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'll be sharing specifically about the BIA NAGPRA Assistance Program CESU agreement that we have between our nonprofit and the BIA. I'd like to highlight that this grew out of a strong commitment to tribal sovereignty and relationship building. Both our team at Archaeology Southwest and the team that I work with at the BIA take this very seriously and understand that that is the cornerstone, foundation, and utmost importance of this work. I'll share a little bit about some of the accomplishments that we've had so far and just spaces for growth as we continue into the program. It is a 5-year agreement, so I'll share our plans for the next 4 years, talk a little bit about some of the assistance that we offer, provide our contact information, and leave plenty of room at the end of this presentation for questions and conversation around NAGPRA and the work that we're doing. So before we really dive in, I'd like to just share some acronyms that I'll be using within this talk. The BIA is short for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a department of the DOI, or Department of Interior, part of the federal US government. We use the term ASW, or acronym ASW, to shorten Archaeology Southwest. So you'll see that throughout these slides. NAGPRA is an acronym that shortens the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, a law passed in 1990. Another law that we'll touch on is ARPA, which is the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, passed in 1979. And CESU, which is the form of agreement that we have with the BIA, is short for Cooperative Ecosystem Studies Unit. These are unique agreements where the federal government is able to partner with outside institutions, universities, museums, nonprofits to move forward work that they need to do in partnership. Not an acronym, but I wanted to just elaborate quickly that I will say the term institutions quite often throughout this presentation as well. In sake of this presentation, that is kind of a catch-all term for universities, museums, repositories, any places that house BIA-controlled collections, as to somewhat protect the spaces where these NAGPRA collections are held, and just not have to say museums, universities, etc. every single time. And then lastly on this slide, I'll share too, this is not an image-heavy PowerPoint, and I tend to only use images in my PowerPoint, so this is a struggle for me. So please bear with me throughout this conversation. Due to the nature of NAGPRA work, I don't share images across this presentation outside of the places that they make sense in context. So my apologies for the text-heavy presentation. So to build on the introduction that Liz already shared, again, my name is Amy Gillaspie. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I am an archaeologist, an anthropologist. lecturer, as well as a museum professional and NAGPRA practitioner. I had a really special, my favorite teacher was my third grade teacher, really special teacher who read us a book. And in this book was an Indiana Jones type of character. And at that time in my life, at the, ripe age of 8 or 9, I was really interested in history. And when this teacher read us this book and taught us about archaeology and what archaeologists do, I was enraptured and enthralled and decided at that point that I would devote and dedicate my life towards archaeology. And I'm very grateful that I have, because throughout my life, that was, gosh, the late 80s, early 90s, around the passage of NAGPRA originally. I've watched the discipline grow and change and thrive and face problems head on. I got my bachelor's degrees in both history and anthropology at the University of Colorado in 2011. Took a break between going back for my master's degree. I was working in real estate in the time, and I'm grateful to that experience for helping me learn how to network and especially problem solve, think on my feet, and build relationships, which is something I was able to bring into my work that I do today. I decided to go back for my master's degree, received that in anthropology with a focus in Mesoamerican archaeology. I spent time working with the Belize Valley Archaeological Reconnaissance Project in Belize, and graduated in the interesting year of 2020. So in that year, of course, we all know what was going on. This beautiful webinar series was built out of that. But I threw myself into a job market that was uncertain, as well as a future that was uncertain, and sort of cast my net wide and would contract and do any sort of work that came my way. And it all comes together within the current role that I have. So I have work experience in teaching. Currently, I'm a lecturer at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. I do a lot of volunteer coordinating in contracts and just pro bono. Currently, I am the volunteer coordinator for this year's International Archaeology Day at Red Rocks on October 18th. If you're local to Denver, please come visit us. It's a free event and wonderful. I also conduct field archaeology. I am the project archaeologist alongside a colleague of mine at the Moche site in the north coast of Peru, Panamarca. I've worked in plenty of museum collections. I've done a multitude of different roles, working in labs and museum collections and the different aspects related to that work. And I've contracted with a lot of research and museum collections work across the board. So all of that has built into working with NAGPRA throughout. When I was working for Denver Museum of Nature and Science, I worked with a wonderful team there who does and always has conducted really strong NAGPRA work, and was privileged enough to participate and be a part of that and learn alongside those wonderful folks. So thank you to everybody that I've worked with prior to this role today. You've lifted me up and taught me a lot. So thank you so much. So what's nice about that is all of those aspects kind of come into the role that I have today as an employee of Archaeology Southwest, working in agreement with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So to move on, a little bit about Archaeology Southwest itself. Archaeology Southwest is a nonprofit that is based in Tucson, Arizona, and has operated for decades there. They branched off of desert archaeology. And the work that they do is multifaceted. The archaeological work they do is preservation archaeology. They take that very seriously, and have a wonderful team that really take a lot of time to carefully consider the work that they're doing, create tribal partnerships, work together to not only practice the consumptive process of archaeology, but to help with research and advocacy, land stewardship, public outreach, education. Centered to all of that is collaboration with Native nations and the relationships that the team at Archaeology Southwest has built over the past few decades. And in that, they've been able to build a relationship with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Originally, about 8 years ago, the BIA and Archaeology Southwest started their relationship together, working in an ARPA initiative. ARPA, again, being the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. I've put some links here, but we can provide these in the chat either later, or I can provide a follow-up to Crow Canyon for these. These are just links to Archaeology Southwest's website as well as the BIA NAGPRA page. So within the ARPA initiative at Archaeology Southwest, just recently at the end of May, my colleagues Shannon Cowell and Anastasia Walhoved actually presented for this webinar series as well. They were able to present on a branch of the ARPA initiative, Safe History. This is on YouTube, so I definitely recommend, if you haven't attended that talk, go ahead and check that out. It's fascinating work that they do. All along, they do damage assessments, archaeological looting, and any archaeological resource crimes. They do wonderful work. So check out this talk. They're able to really delve into the work that they do and all the aspects that they work in as well. So check that out. But out of that relationship between the BIA and Archaeology Southwest, thanks to the work that they've done, they build a strong relationship. The Bureau of Indian Affairs actually reached out to Archaeology Southwest last year to see if there would be any interest in creating a NAGPRA assistance program. So to talk a little bit about that agreement and how that came to pass, of course, first, I want to acknowledge the passage of NAGPRA, again, that being the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act that passed in 1990, that was intended to address and make illegal the archaeological excavation or looting or removal of indigenous graves or grave goods, and that they could no longer be investigated in archaeological forms in any way. Also, of course, intended within this original law was that institutions that housed ancestors and their belongings that had been removed previously were intended to repatriate and return those ancestors and their belongings to culturally affiliated tribes, which many of us know. I'm not going to delve deep into the history of NAGPRA here for this talk today, just for sake of time, but there were some successes and there were some problems with the original passage of NAGPRA. The latest regulation updates intending to address some of those issues occurred in January of 2024 recently. Really key to those latest regulation updates are a few things. Specifically, the ones that I want to call out are that institutions can no longer hide by culturally unaffiliated, that geography or the geographic location of where an ancestor was removed will be sufficient to help claim cultural affiliation, and most importantly, that institutions must defer to tribal knowledge. Which was not the case prior. Some institutions did do that, of course, but there were problems that occurred where that was not part of it. And TIPOs, tribal representatives, were absolutely just being traumatized and run ragged in the process of NAGPRA. So these regulations, of course, come with their own situation and are intended to help move through some of these problems, and we'll hopefully see some good progress here as we continue into the future. So again, the BIA approached Archaeology Southwest asking about an assistance program, and in late summer 2024, the Archaeology Southwest at the BIA signed a 5-year CESU agreement. And so what that means is that Archaeology Southwest is going to assist the Bureau of Indian Affairs on all things NAGPRA. So I'm going to run through some of the tasks that Archaeology Southwest is assigned and some of the ways that we're intending to help, and then we'll move further into kind of the current work that we've been doing this year and what our plans are into the future. So first, we are digitizing all BIA NAGPRA documentation across the board, and this is just to help with the great cohorts of folks that came before us and their great work that they've done. But especially with the early stages of NAGPRA, we know that there was letters being sent through the Postal Service, and correspondence was quite different than it is today. The concept of a video chat wasn't even anything but maybe the stuff of science fiction in 1990. So While recent correspondence and communications and work has been digitized, some of the early documentation is not. So we're helping with that. Also, Archaeology Southwest is able to provide assistance with drafting policy. This is an open and fluid conversation. Within NAGPRA, of course, there are specific laws that need to be followed and specific policies that are intended to be followed. But the nature of NAGPRA work does have some fluidity to it, especially when it comes to the relationship building aspect of that. So we're working currently on a consultation policy. And that's been a long conversation for good reason. We're doing our best to help understand all the nuance of the work that is set out in front of us. And then we were tasked with creating a team of 4 Archaeology Southwest employees to implement this work. And so I'd just like to pause and say thank you to Ben and Anastasia and Sky for their work that they've been doing within Archaeology Southwest, helping us with NAGPRA, as well as our support team in John and Shannon and Steve. Thank you for helping us. And on the BIA side, I want to thank Tamara, Rashanda, Kendall, and Clarissa for all the work that they've done. To continue on for the tasks that we have outlined in our agreement, one of the aspects of our work will include visiting institutions on a need by need basis. And this is in order to assist with inventories and consultations. Of course, every institution has different stages of the NAGPRA process that they're in. Some are early stage, some have been doing NAGPRA and have really staffed and fluid communities within their own institutions that are doing lots and lots and lots of NAGPRA consultation, not just those related to BIA collections. So we have a really unique opportunity as being part of Archaeology Southwest and a nonprofit. With the support of the BIA, we're able to assist if there's a short inventory that needs to be completed and there's not the staff available for it, for example. So those just come up in conversations with the institutions that we work with. Additionally, one of our large tasks is going to be a multi-tribal large-scale consultation, as well as a multi-institution collaboration. And the intention of this work is to respectfully repatriate ancestors and their belongings that were removed across decades near Mesa Verde in the Four Corners area. That is something that we just started working on this year, and we'll really hit the ground running in 2026 on. Additionally, we are working on synthesizing the known inventories of BIA-controlled collections, and the reason why we're doing this is to better understand split collections. So many of you know, especially in early archaeology, collectors, archaeologists, looters would go out and excavate a site or a location, and some of those excavations would deeply regrettably and unfortunately disinter hundreds or thousands of ancestors. And the way that archaeology was practiced until the passage of NAGPRA, and sometimes illegally after the passage of NAGPRA, would be that in the name of capital S science, these collections would be shared among colleagues and split across institutions. And this has created a logistical and traumatic nightmare for both tribes and for NAGPRA practitioners working towards repatriating and sending these ancestors home. So the scale and scope of BIA-controlled collections across the United States is something that we're addressing, and we're looking at where split collections are housed, and talking with institutions to gain their support in working together in consultation with tribes to either reunite or repatriate these collections. Additionally, we organize and facilitate consultations with tribes, institutions, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We've been able to have quite a few of these over the past year, and it has been a really great experience so far. We're grateful to all of our tribal partners and all of our institution partners for the work that they're doing and the time that they're providing to this process and getting the NAGPRA process moving and ancestors home. Additionally, we'll assist with transfer of control as needed. And that can be both paperwork or physical. We're able to provide transfers physically from location to location in consultation as needed. We do offer assistance with repatriation and or reburials, and that will just be, again, requested in consultation. If a tribe would like us present for that or assistance from us for the reburials, we are happy to provide that and or offer support either in person or not. So that is a topic of conversation that changes with each consultation. And lastly, we are able to provide trainings for tribal partners on a request basis. So as we're working with them, it's something that we offer as an opportunity for other staff members, kind of a NAGPRA 101, but we can craft it into whatever we need to best suit the needs of our partners. So that kind of brings you current with what the agreement outlines and what we're intended to be doing. One of the realities that hit us, as mentioned earlier, Liz shared, I started in this role in September of 2024, and I was finishing my tenure at Denver Museum of Nature and Science at that time. So I worked both roles 20 hours per week, part-time through the end of 2024 to complete my work at the museum. I started full-time in this role January 1st of this year, and due to the new regulations, we quickly hit a deadline on January 13th. That deadline included that any institution that's received federal funding is intended and must provide a updated list of collections and holdings, excuse me, to different federal agencies if they believe that those federal agencies are in control of collections at that institution. So the BIA received 52 statement letters leading up to January 13th, and within the regulations, we were provided 180 days to respond. So we hit the ground running with reaching out to these institutions, working through understanding their collections and responding to them over that 180 days. And it took us 180 days to get through them all. So if you are an institution partner on this call or on this webinar today, thank you for your work with us and your patience as we worked through those. It was a large task, and we're very grateful because it's provided a wonderful picture of our work moving forward. But I just want to share briefly here what a BIA-controlled collection is. Control is a legal term outlined in NAGPRA that relates to not necessarily the ownership or the possession of the collection, but it has to do with federal law. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs will assert control over a collection of archaeological materials that can include ancestors' belongings, objects of cultural patrimony, or sacred objects, as to be determined in consultation. And those can be either excavated or looted, but they do need to be removed from tribal reservation or trust lands within a certain time frame. And that's between the passage of the Antiquities Act, which occurred on June 8th of 1906, and the passage of ARPA, or again, the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. And that passed October 31st, 1979. There are some other stipulations outside of that that lend to the BIA either asserting or declining control over a collection. But I won't delve into those here. If you want to have a conversation about that, I'm happy to meet. I'll provide my contact information at the end to discuss that with you with the BIA at a later time. But that's the general consensus. And what that means is then those collections at these institutions are now under the control of the BIA. And any NAGPRA collection, the BIA is moving forward in the NAGPRA process towards reaching out to possibly culturally affiliated tribes and starting the consultation and repatriation process. Again, some institutions are already in that process, and we will just step in where they're at. So, accomplishments so far within our program. Amazingly, I was thinking in the last year, but this is really January through August so far. Our really unique and special cooperative program has been able to publish 6 joint notices. We have 3 that are pending publication with National NAGPRA currently. We've conducted 13 consultations between institutions, tribes, and the BIA. We have participated in 2 transfers of collections. We replied to 43 of those statements as outlined in the NAGPRA regulations update, and that included if we asserted or declined control over collections at institutions. There were additional institutions that we are working with in that 180 days that I mentioned earlier that we were allowed to respond. There was a stipulation in the regulations that if we do not respond, we automatically assert control over those collections. So the folks that have not been provided a statement response yet are kind of legacy institutions that the BIA and teams before our current team have been working with and have asserted control over in the past. And we're working with them currently to move forward in the NAGPRA process with those collections. So far, we've also participated in 5 repatriations. We were invited to attend one reburial that was a long-term joint reburial and repatriation. And we have discussed this program at 6 conferences now, sort of coming out just to introduce ourselves, our work, what we're doing, how we're seeing it, and get to know folks. And myself and a colleague of mine at Archaeology Southwest were able to attend the 2025 InStep program. That's the intensive NAGPRA summer training and education program, and that was held this year in South Carolina. 2 of our other colleagues had applied but were not accepted this year, so we're encouraging them to apply again next year to the InStep program. And within all of this, again, this is a really unique partnership that we have, where as Archaeology Southwest, we don't sit within the federal government. We are a nonprofit, so we are able to help move NAGPRA forward in ways that the BIA might have some sort of, I don't know what the term is. If they have some sort of speed bump or roadblock that they're facing, we're able to help move the NAGPRA process forward, of course, with their support and their communication, and they're looped in to the entire process. But for instance, with the transfers, the BIA was facing federal agencies were facing a travel restriction earlier this year. So Archaeology Southwest was able to step in and physically conduct that transfer as partners with the BIA. In that, there's plenty of room for growth, and we know that we're building this program as we work it. We know our goals. We know that building our relationships with tribes and treating those with utmost respect is our main goal. Getting ancestors home is our main goal. And around that, we're able to see what works and what doesn't work. So again, thank you to my team. I'm grateful for you all. This is not possible for one person, let alone many people to do. So I do not do this work alone by any means. But we have many areas where we grow, and we have conversations where we get together and talk about what's working and what isn't working. And we're really finding our pace. So we're looking forward to the next few years. Some of the assistance that we offer in our program, and this is both for tribal partners, TIPOs, tribal representatives, as well as institutions. So if you're an institution that thinks possibly you might have BIA controlled collections or you'd like to discuss that further, please feel free to reach out. Same if you are a tribal representative, NAGPRA officer, or TIPO, we're happy to talk about any of these topics with you. So again, we offer assistance in determining control for BIA specific collections, not for others. We are able to do things like provide some assistance physically with inventory. We love to facilitate and provide consultations. So that's a strong area that we do a lot of work. We work with our institution partners and ask them to draft notices for us. They are joint notices between their institution and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The reason why we ask them to do that work is their institutional knowledge, their documentation, their archives, being within their collections, they tend to have a better grasp on the collections than us walking in and learning about it from the teams that have worked previous to us at the BIA or previous curators or whatnot at those institutions. So we'll review those draft notices and send those to tribal partners for review as well. And then the BIA Tamara Billy will send out those notices for publication to National NAGPRA. Once that process happens, we're happy to provide a claim letter template for anybody that would like to talk about that. We can talk about that off of this meeting as well. But we coordinate then at that point the repatriation once claims have been filed. And again, with invitation or needs, just based on the situation, we provide assistance with reburial. And we're also open to discussing different training options. So moving forward into the next 4 years, we had within our original scope of our agreement, it included a minimum of 10 institutions across 5 states. And that was outlined as a minimum that we could add more to it at that point. On the other side of that, as we work through our statements, that has grown to our total list of 52 institutions located across 23 states in the United States of America. So that does not mean that we are going to address all 52 institutions in 23 states in the next 4 years. We are currently meeting with institutions to with Archaeology Southwest and the BIA to kind of create workflows and determine where they're at in their NAGPRA process. Some of these institutions also have CESU agreements with the BIA, so they have folks on the ground doing NAGPRA work within the institution itself. So we're just addressing needs all across all BIA controlled collections. And over the next year, we'll really determine a path forward on how we can best move collections towards consultation, repatriation, and return. So a few of the things that we are prioritizing, as I mentioned already, consultations that are so-called close to the finish line. So this will include perhaps ancestors or belongings or sacred objects or objects of cultural patrimony that have been consulted on, and there has been a notice published in the past, and maybe a claim was not filed. We'll revisit that. If, we're close to that process and consultations have happened and we just need to get a notice published, we're happy to work with that. So we're prioritizing those because they've already had so much work done with them. At the same time, we're having conversations about those that have not been addressed yet because they're equally as important as well. When I use the term prioritize, I'd like to emphasize that doesn't mean value. None of these ancestors or collections are more valuable or more important than others. They all need to go home, and we know that. So we are also, as discussed earlier, prioritizing split collections, understanding where those are located, and consulting with tribal partners on the best needs to either reunite those collections or repatriate them together. We'll continue our consultations and repatriations. This runs alongside all of the work that we're doing always. We're doing consultations and repatriations as kind of the side work. As we're doing other things, that's our constant stream of work. And then we're going to continue to share about our program. So thank you again for attending today. We're offering assistance. So if you have questions or would like to reach out and learn more, or talk through if you think you have a possible BIA controlled collection, our inbox is open. We definitely understand that that is a possibility. I don't know what happened to my slide. I might have accidentally deleted it with my contact information, so I don't have that there. So I will provide that here in the chat in just a moment. But I just would like to take this time again to say thank you to Crow Canyon for inviting us to share about this work that we're doing. And thank you to the team that I work with in institutions, tribal partners, within Archaeology Southwest, within the BIA. I'm so grateful, especially in the current climate, to be doing this work. I'm glad that we're moving it forward and having the opportunity to think a little outside of the box and make sure that this gets done. So thank you all so much, and I'd love to leave time for any questions.
Thanks so much, Amy. Fantastic preservation or presentation about preservation and
Right.
all those P words. Yeah, they
Thank
trip me
you.
up sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few questions, and someone has popped one in that's a little bit of an elephant in the room, and I don't think you could get away without answering it, which is if to the best of your ability.
Sure.
Are you worried about the current administration, dismantling ARPA or NAGPRA? what might happen to this important work, which of course, there's no real answer to this question, but
Sure.
it looks large, of course.
Sure. I'm grateful for this question because it is a topic of conversation with many of us, if not all of us. Um, I think I will say that to answer it, I will step away from my role as the Archaeology Southwest BIA NAGPRA Assistance Program Coordinator and answer this as Amy, the anthropologist, as much as that is possible. Um, there are concerns, of course. I think that many aspects of anthropological work, archaeological work, is under threat. And I think that um, we're going to need to maybe not reinvent the wheel, but I have a lot of faith and hope and belief that the folks in this field are going to figure out ways to make it through. So while NAGPRA work itself specifically is related to federal law, that's to be seen. We do receive messaging that NAGPRA is still a priority of the current administration. So I'm grateful for that. And I think, again, somewhat off the record, I've been joking I'm going to work until they turn the lights off. So it is an important question and an important conversation. And I'm grateful for whomever asked that. Thank you for asking it for sure. We'll need to continue to work together as a community and figure this out.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. Things that keep me up at night.
No, for all of us,
Yeah.
but your point is there's really good people doing this work and we'll continue to support them. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Kind of as interesting and specific question around wondering if is it normal, has BIA always entered into agreements of this sort in order to get NAGPRA work done? Is this something that Arc Southwest kind of was already doing? Kind of how does that work? It's really
So
interesting.
Arc Southwest was not doing any NAGPRA work because they were not an institution that holds ancestors or belongings. The way that they have approached their archaeological work, there hasn't been a specific need for the immediate call for NAGPRA when it comes to ancestors and belongings. There is a greater conversation, of course, about objects of cultural patrimony and sacred objects that is had within Archaeology Southwest. So, but within practicing NAGPRA work, this is new to Archaeology Southwest. I also don't want to speak for my BIA partners. I know that there is, from the meetings that I've sat in on, there is a long history of at least the last 10 to 15 years where there's been funding to gain a clear understanding of what collections are out there and that NAGPRA has been prioritized among them. I think it's been a constant struggle with staffing, as many folks have talked about in NAGPRA from the beginning. A lot of times I feel like NAGPRA coordinators or NAGPRA leads are a job that's placed on top of another job, and like a curator or a collections manager will be the NAGPRA lead, and it's just two jobs genuinely. So there have been plenty of folks in the BIA that have been doing this work for decades, and we're grateful to them because we're able to lean back and look at the work that they've done and view that, and they've made a lot of progress. So we're grateful to kind of pick up the line and continue to carry it.
Fantastic. That's great. So something that came up for me when you were just in these last few slides kind of talking about the work that you're doing and the institutions, I was just kind of curious as to when you go out to meet with institutions, how are they doing? How are they feeling about it? What are their challenges? I just would love to be a fly on the wall, right? To see
Sure.
like.
Overwhelmingly, I feel like because of the first question, that we're uncertain on what's happening and what's going to happen in the future, within many aspects of current life in the United States. I feel like there's a strong sense of motivation. So I would say overwhelmingly the majority of folks I talk to are passionate and on fire and just driven and moving the line forward and getting towards um, repatriation and getting ancestors home. And there's a overwhelming attitude shift. I'm grateful to be part of this generation because I feel like I'm not hitting walls where people before me did, and I've read books and reports and heard firsthand accounts of institutions that were extraordinarily problematic. And um, it's a bigger conversation to talk about the flaws of archaeology and our ethics and our history. That's real. That's very real. And to be able to practice NAGPRA, I feel like we have to be able to address that and look that in the eye and sit with that. And I feel like the folks that I work with across almost all of the institutions really have that attitude and have that drive. So the morale is mixed.
Sure,
I
sure.
feel like it's a very similar approach to folks that work in Section 106 or historic preservation or CRM. You know, we're all very driven and very lit up right now, but there's a nervous energy too. But I feel like overwhelmingly folks are using that to drive forward positively,
That's
which is great.
wonderful.
I was so
Yeah.
happy to see that. So happy to see that. It helps me get up every single day to just know that the people I'm working with across the country are just fantastic folks.
That's huge. I love to hear that, right? Just your words, right? An overwhelming attitude shift. That's just wonderful. I'm so
Yeah,
glad to
yeah,
hear that, and that's something that that we talk about a lot here. So really
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And there's
Thanks for
a
asking.
Yeah, I was just starting, I was in school when NAGPRA was passed, and so was kind of right there at ground zero with how that was received in the community as well, and then haven't done as much with it in the last 20 years. Um, and there's a couple questions from listeners that kind of speak to that I have to remember. Not everybody was there in 1990. Not
Sure.
everybody's working on it now, and so I wanted to throw in these questions from the audience where someone asks that speaks to that attitude shift. Has NAGPRA gotten significant pushback from the anthropology community? And which, of course, there's a whole history now. I can't believe how long ago that actually was. Uh, um, uh, but um, but it sounds like you're experiencing a shift in that kind of pushback, huh?
I am, and I think a piece of it too, I'm watching it. I feel like I sit between the generations. It just my age and when I went to school. So I feel like when I started my undergrad, NAGPRA was like maybe half of a day. You know, it was not a
Mhm.
topic of conversation. It was like a history note, right? Like NAGPRA was passed in 1990. We're going to take it for granted. It's a thing we're
Yeah,
doing. And like,
yeah.
duh, we should have been doing it kind of presentation. And then when I went back for my master's, what I'm really grateful for, I spent a lot of time, especially pandemic and post-pandemic, thinking about, do I want to be an archaeologist? Do I want to be involved in this work? Do my
Mhm.
personal values, again, sitting outside of the current role that I have, how do I feel about being involved in this very real problematic colonial institution in history? And I feel like when I went back to grad school, the folks that I've worked with, I realized my field school, the people that I've worked with are all extremely ethical. They're all either from or already collaborating with source communities. Before that was kind of a topic of conversation, and I had to think back retroactively and be like, oh, I took that for granted because it was already included in the way I was trained in the teens.
Mhm.
And so I'm very grateful for that because I didn't even realize that I could have been doing archaeology a completely different way.
Mhm.
And in that too, generationally, I'm in my 40s. I work with folks that are coming in and starting their careers post bachelor, post MA, post PhD. Um, and it's just how it is that there is a conversation around the history of archaeology. There's a conversation around NAGPRA. Um, and it might just be the folks that I am colleagues with. But I feel like, again, it's overwhelmingly like this is important, and it's not just because it's a law we have to follow. Um,
Right.
we're doing it to build relationships, and we're doing it to address um, and work towards some format of repair for the deep damage that has been done.
That's
Not like we're
fantastic.
going to solve all the problems. There's no savior complex in it. We're able to sit down and
Yeah.
have hard conversations with tribal partners and hear about, the real histories that have affected folks that were brushed off by archaeologists of previous generations at times. Not always, but at times.
Sure. Well said, Amy. Well said. And I wanted a couple folks in the audience had kind of expressed things that they've kind of heard about institutions. You know, one person mentions, I've heard the Smithsonian has been difficult for tribes to work with. We have someone mentioning who's from San Francisco that they've heard frustrations about UC Berkeley having pushback. I
Mm.
don't know, if those are your institutions, but I think maybe the question out of that is there, is there movement? Is there more rules that might push movement, or do you just feel that the tide is turning and this kind of perception that is might still be out there with these big institutions? What do you think about that?
Again, thoughts that keep me up at night. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So I'm happy that folks are asking those questions because I have those questions too. Honestly, I
Yeah,
have heard the same things, the same resistance, problematic administrations,
yeah,
problematic institutions. So I will say personally, not speaking for the BIA or Archaeology Southwest, I feel like I am seeing a tide turn, but it's within a very specific scope. So I do not work with Smithsonian. Smithsonian kind of lays outside of all of this. But
mm,
I've worked with some of the larger institutions that have reputations. And I will say that my interactions with them have been overwhelmingly positive. I've worked with small institutions that no one's ever heard of that have been both overwhelmingly positive and overwhelmingly negative.
mm,
I think, again, and this is a personal thought, I think it boils down to support. And I've talked with a good friend of mine who does NAGPRA for the state of Colorado, Chance Ward, about this. We've talked about having the support at the director or the CEO or the president level and how much difference that makes. Because some of the institutions that have bad reputations, working with them, the folks that are working in NAGPRA, or, having worked with different institutions myself, and not necessarily having the top reaching level of support that could be out there, the department itself is aligned and driven and moving. And then there's either culture of fear or resistance, or they're thinking, finances are the bottom line and they're not thinking in the
mhm,
realm of ethics and NAGPRA. I think
right.
I think it really boils down to when I was at Instep, I talked with somebody about this. They're like, I work in the director's office and I just don't feel like I should be here. And I'm like, you are the person that should be here. We need to be talking to the folks that are, I hate the term, but like the decision makers or the policy
Sure.
makers,
Yeah.
and getting support there because everybody that I've talked to that's working in these collections and whatnot are 100% on board, and not all of them, but some of them are expressing frustration with the bureaucracy or the red tape or the fighting the ghosts of their reputation because there were problematic administrations and now they're not anymore. They're undoing decades of damage. So I
Wow.
think that continuing to build community around it and lift each other up and face the problems head on and face the conflict head on is the way forward. So I hope that addresses what we were talking about. Felt like I got
No,
on the
that's
soapbox a little bit.
oh, that's really great. I mean, the tone from the top definitely matters, right? Like you said, whether it's, if there are decision makers, but that's huge, right? That's a culture, it's a norm, situation in those institutions. And kind of while you were talking, a question popped in that from one of the viewers that says, well, how do you deal with difficult institutions that don't want to participate, right, or give back? And in a way, you sort of answered some of that, is try to go up the chain, try to influence that. You mentioned in your comments, right? Sometimes they're overwhelmingly positive, sometimes they're overwhelmingly negative. Do you have a particular approach if you are in one of those sort of standing in the fire, difficult situations?
Yeah, yeah. Again, so I sit in a unique position, being that I am the employee of a nonprofit, contracted and working in agreement with one of the federal agencies. So my NAGPRA realm is niche, right? Like I'm working in a very specific space. So there's topics that I'm not able to address in NAGPRA just due to they fall outside of BIA scope, or you need to talk to your administration, or you need to talk to tribes about that. So around that, of course, I think my tactic and my approach, and I have support around this with the folks I work with, is to try to build relationships and face it head on and sit through the hard conversations. And we've sat through some hard conversations. And a lot of times on the other side of that is a different conversation that happens. It doesn't mean that we'll always have progress the way we want it to be. So there, I mean, it is a federal law. So at the end of the day, we do still have that as teeth behind us. Um,
Yeah.
it's extraordinarily rare, and we haven't really ever gotten to the point where it's gotten that rough. But there's instances where it's gotten close. So that's for me kind of a last ditch effort to be like, well, there's a law, you know. I'm hopeful that there are ways around it outside of that, but it's tough for sure. It is tough.
Oh, that's great. Excellent answer. Leaning into the discomfort is something that we're all getting used to doing.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
So maybe time for one more question as we get close to the end. Maybe sort of just a process nuts and bolts question for folks who aren't as familiar with how it happens. One of the viewers asks, well, how do you determine which tribes are culturally affiliated to consult with them? And I'm sort of interested because it's been 20 years since I last wrote a cultural affiliation study, which I did worked on for the Animus La Plata project here close to Cortez. And I'm
Mhm.
hoping earlier in your slides, you sort of mentioned that things have evolved and changed where tribal perspectives are given more weight. And so I'm kind of interested to hear, today, has that shifted and evolved, how cultural affiliation is actually determined?
Again, for the work that I do, it's niche, it's BIA, and due to BIA controlled collections coming off of reservation or trust land,
Mhm.
we have the geographic question answered already. So I may not be the best person to answer this, but my understanding of it is that previously, say, an ancestor was disinterred and removed from an area that is perhaps maybe like private land is a good example, or a state park or something like that, or a land that became a national monument or whatnot. If there is provenience information associated with this individual or individuals where they were removed from, there's plenty of information out there now about ancestral homelands, traditional use lands, current land use for different tribes. And there's also so far, what I've come up with is that a lot of tribes have working relationships too, and understand the importance that sometimes if an individual is listed as culturally unaffiliated and that information's ambiguous, or whoever disinterred them did not keep their records, and that happens sadly, very sadly. There's been instances with For example, when I worked at Denver Museum of Nature and Science, there were individuals that a space of land was used, and there was multi-denomination tribal partners, as well as, I believe, a rabbi and a priest that came together with the state of Colorado and reburied these individuals. Or if it relates to NAGPRA specifically, tribes will work together to have one tribe step forward as the claimant tribe, and they'll work together to get these ancestors to a space to rebury them. So it happens. It's again, it's really, since my world is outside of that, and I have pretty much a clear picture of where individuals are coming from. A lot of times, depending on the history of if there was displacement for that tribe or not, their reservation land, their original boundaries, just the laws around all of that is how we'll determine
Mhm.
to help move that conversation forward. And then we'll bring in tribes that could possibly be affiliated as well to the initial conversations to make sure that we're not, for the sake of efficiency, leaving folks out. And we'll let that conversation happen between tribal representatives and then back them up and support them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Amy, we're right about 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation and for sharing your perspectives and a great discussion. And if you're down in this area, please come and visit with us.
Absolutely, yes. I will be again soon. I'm not sure if it'll be this year or early next year, but I will reach out for sure. And thank you everybody for tuning in today and for your questions. I really appreciate you just coming to hear about this. And I did put it, kind of might got mixed in. NAGPRA at archaeologysouthwest.org is a great place to reach out to us. And yeah, I'm just grateful for your time. So thank you all.
Yeah, we're grateful for the work that you're doing and for sharing it with us. And we hope
Yeah,
to see and hear more of you.
thank you.
Have a great evening, Amy.
You
Thanks so much.
too.
Okay. Bye-bye.